Welcome back to the Pigskins and Politics podcast. I am your host, Brian McFadden, and we are back for this week's politics chat. We're joined again by our guest, Jay Averill. Jay, welcome back. You ready to go after your 5-minute break? We talked a lot about football. It was fantastic. Take a little breather. You ready to do some politics?
Yeah, let's do the palate cleanser first.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
the priorities. I love it.
that's
You
right.
understand that this is why we do it this way. I would never ask myself, my guests, or my listeners to go straight from talking an hour and a half to NFL football right into some political chat, because that's just insane. No, we're going to cleanse your palate first, people. All right. We are going to talk a little bit about something that has absolutely nothing to do with football or politics. We're going to get refreshed. We're going to take a deep breath, and then we're going to jump into the political realm. So our palate cleanser for this week. So I wanted to talk about top 5 shows of all time. So last week with Claudie, we were talking about Breaking Bad, which I called one of the best shows of all time. So when I was chatting with you about what we could do for the palate cleanser this week, why don't we each share our top 5 shows of all time? We can give just a couple minute blurb about why we think our ranking is that. I'd love to start with you, Jay. Let's hear what are your top 5 favorite shows, and it's subjective. So what you can rank them because of personal preference, because of critical appeal, whatever. What are your top 5 shows?
So we just run through all 5 of them.
Run through them, sure.
All right. So number 5 is Jeopardy.
Did you say Jeopardy?
Jeopardy. And so,
nice.
So I guess let me explain.
I didn't see that angle coming. I love it.
Yeah. Let me explain my criteria here a little
Rest
bit.
in peace, Alex Trebek.
Exactly. Totally. I figured out a few years ago the best way for me to figure out my favorite movies are the ones where, as I'm flipping through the TV, like if I happen to just catch them on, I'll watch it. That's the same criteria I'm using for television shows. So all of these, I will either watch reruns if they're on and not care about it, or I've watched them multiple times as part of the, if they're a series. So yeah, Jeopardy is number 5, just because I will always watch Jeopardy if it's on. It's something I watch nightly. I watch with my mom growing up. My 4-year-old now sits there and watches with me and sings the theme song. I think that's his favorite part. So yeah, Jeopardy is my number 5. Number 4 is The Wire. Great show. One that took me a little while to get into. I think that's common that I hear from people. So I always encourage you, hey, no, stick with it a few episodes. And yeah, some seasons were definitely better than others, but The Wire is a great show and one I've watched multiple times.
Personal confession. So I did not make it far enough in to get hooked. I actually did try to watch The Wire for the first time earlier this summer during pandemic. I actually released my own list on Facebook, similar to this. Top 10 lists. Everybody was doing those lists in the beginning. Yeah. Like, we were all bored as hell and we didn't know what to do. We were all locked in. But I knew there were certain shows I needed to watch. And of course, a lot of people on their list, they put Sopranos, they put The Wire. And I tried both of those shows. Actually, Sopranos, we made it a couple seasons. But confession, we kind of lost interest. And The Wire was the same. It didn't hook me. I'm sure it was one of those that got good later. But tell me more about why you love The Wire.
Again, just the storyline. I mean, I'm real into kind of the crime and organized crime, and there was a lot of that in The Wire. I mean, obviously, the name is about the wiretaps, but I love the way that it went from season to season and, integrated the police, but they were always different. Different angles, different backdrops that they were working within. And just kind of seeing the evolution of it all. I thought the overall storyline and the grittiness of it was great. The characters were fascinating. And to me, I mean, one of the other things that I love on these shows, although it's a little bit more, but I love when, you might watch one of your favorite characters or main character and you don't know when they're going to die at any moment. So always keeps me in suspense.
Yep. Okay. Fantastic. Yeah. What's number 3?
Seinfeld. Again, a show that, grew up on, love it, can sit there. If the rerun's on, I'm going to watch it. I quote it all the time. So yeah, it's hard not to include Seinfeld on my list. Number 2, Game of Thrones.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, it might have been higher, and then it might have been lower. I considered it, actually keeping it off my list even, just because the
last 2 seasons.
The last 2 seasons were so bad, and it's funny. I have another show to thank me for The Sopranos, True Detective. I saw the previews for it coming out, and I was like, oh man, that show looks amazing. Like season 1 when it came out, signed up for HBO just for True Detective. True Detective was okay to me. But at the same time, I think we were on season 3 of Game of Thrones. People were talking about it. I'm like, oh, let me check this out. I'm not real into fantasy. Didn't think I'd enjoy it. Oh, I love the hell out of Game of Thrones so much that I've read all the books twice.
Same.
I've seen season 1 of Game of Thrones probably 10 times. Each time a new season would come out, I'd have to go back and rewatch all of the previous seasons to get to where I was. So Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the hell out of Game of Thrones, all the lore behind it, trying to guess what was going to happen in the last two seasons before it all just disappointed the hell out of me. So, still looking forward to the last two books. If George Martin ever decides he's going to
If they
get,
ever, yeah.
if he writes them before he dies, basically, to see what ending he had in store, because
Right.
yeah, very very unfulfilling on the television series. I am looking forward to the prequels though and see what they do with those. So wait
I'll
for them
take
to start.
anything as bad as those last two seasons were. It has not soured. I'll take anything Game of Thrones related. So, what is your number one then? If Game of Thrones is number two,
And you killed me with your earlier comments, but my number one is The Sopranos.
ah,
Love The Sopranos.
right.
Love anything mafia related. Again, I said I'm into the organized crime. I'd say probably half of my favorite movies are in that realm, whether it be Goodfellas, Godfather 1, Godfather 2. So, yeah, it's just right up my alley. I love the hell out of Sopranos.
And it was good. It's not that I didn't think it was good. It just didn't hook me. So I'm gonna use that to segue into my list. And the reasoning for my list are these are shows that the whole week I'm looking forward to it. I'm thinking about it. I can't wait until Sunday night is usually like the night, right? So I can't wait till Sunday night. And like you said, for some of these, Game of Thrones, no secret, is on this list. Rewatch every season before the new season comes out, to where I've seen every season like 7 or 8 times. And so that was my personal criteria am I just dying to see the next episode? And I never got that with Sopranos. It was good. It was quality. I liked it. I like mob stuff too, but I just wasn't like chomping at the bit first thing Monday morning. I can't wait till Sunday. So here's my list. First, I want to start with an honorable mention. So we know I'm a Star Wars nerd. We've mentioned that. I'm going to mention it at some point on every one of my podcasts, it seems. So I have to put The Mandalorian on this list. It is not in my top 5 yet. Now that could change. It's certainly shooting up there. When I made this list earlier during the pandemic and put it on Facebook, it was a top 10 list, and Mandalorian was still honorable mention outside the top 10. But if we did a top 6, Mandalorian would have been number 6. So it's like pushing right there to get into the top 5. And like I said, they're not even done with season 2. So it's very, very good chance that it could keep moving up if the quality keeps improving as they're doing. Number 5, Westworld. So I absolutely loved Westworld. The third season is not as interesting, and the second season is great, but the first season was phenomenal. Just gripping television. When the theme song, the intro comes in every season, you're shaking your head. Nobody can see, but you're shaking your head. You disagree, and I want to hear about that in a second. But I just really the mystery of it all, the way it all tied in was very cerebral. I'm a big Christopher Nolan fan. I know this wasn't Christopher Nolan; it was his brother Jonathan. But Jonathan worked with Chris on a lot of the movies together, and you saw a hint of that. So huge Westworld fan. Quickly, why are you shaking your head at Westworld?
I didn't get any of that. Sci-fi is not my favorite genre.
Fair enough.
I watched it because it looked like it was good. Got a lot of hype. I think I watched 1 or 2 episodes. I was like, yeah, this is just not my thing. So yeah.
No, you missed all the reveals. The first season is incredible because you don't know what's going on, and there's so many different timelines.
I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, there's different timelines, but you don't know that they're different timelines until like 7 episodes in. Anyway, fantastic. We can debate those. The later seasons, I still enjoy it, but that first season, fantastic. Number 4, Ozark. So when I ranked this, so this is a show on Netflix, Jason Bateman, Laura Linney. When I did my top 10 list, Ozark was like 7 or 8 earlier this year, but that was before season 3. Season 3, phenomenal. If anyone who likes Breaking Bad, it's not a similar story, but it's a similar feel. It's a self-contained story. They've already said they've got the end in mind. It's going to be 2 more seasons, so 5 seasons, just like Breaking Bad. It's dark, it's gritty, it's so well written. The characters are phenomenal. The acting is superb, and it's must-see TV. It's one of those. As soon as the episode ends, I cannot wait until. This is bingeable. It's not even, you don't have to wait till Sunday night. We would just binge the episodes right after another. That's how I knew it had to be. And after that third season, best so far, that bumped Ozark into my top 5. Number 3, you actually mentioned it, True Detective, just season 1. Now, the reason I have that caveat is because there were 2 more seasons released. The second one I watched, it was entertaining. The third one, honestly, didn't even finish. But they're self-contained. They're completely different stories, different actors. They're not related. The first season of True Detective, couldn't get enough of it. My wife and I, as soon as the show ends, I can't wait till next Sunday. I need to see what happens. It was just so gripping. Woody Harrelson, Matthew McConaughey were just fantastic in it. The story, the characters, everything. Loved it. Number 2, now we're getting to the classics. Breaking Bad, I mentioned last week. And I could be convinced to put this number 1, and obviously we know what number 1 is going to be. But as of now, it is number 2, and it's firmly number 2, and I don't see anything else overtaking that unless Ozark just gets phenomenal in the last 2 seasons. But I mean, what else to say is about Breaking Bad? We said it last week. It's just such a beautiful self-contained story with a fitting beginning and a fitting end. These shows like The Walking Dead was technically on my top 10, but probably only the first like 5 or 6 seasons. And it just kept going, and it's still going, and there's spinoffs like end the freaking story. So Breaking Bad is my number 2, and my number 1, despite the horrible, especially season 8, is Game of Thrones, because no show has ever induced the kind of obsession for me as Game of Thrones has. And I am a fantasy fan, but it's not just about that. My parents got into. My mom loves Game of Thrones. They would rewatch it every year. They would get their red wine ready and their goblets when Breaking Bad would, or I'm sorry, when Game of Thrones would premiere on Sundays. We went to like not a convention, but it was like a costume display in New York where they brought all these Game of Thrones, like a touring display thing after season 2, before season 3. We waited in line for 3 or 4 hours to see that. That's when you know the show's on a different level. When you're waiting in line in the freaking cold in New York City so that you can see a few set pieces. So despite everything that happened with that last season in particular, Game of Thrones is still my favorite show of all time. I am looking forward to the prequels, and if George Martin does release those last 2 books, I will be scooping those up because I also read the books. My palate has been cleansed. How about yours?
I'm feeling better. I do have one question for you.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Curiosity, because like I said, I watched Game of Thrones over and over and over again. I have never gone back and rewatched season 8. Have you?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, That's the only one. That's a good question. That's an excellent question. I never even thought about it. And I have zero desire. Like, to me, that just, I'm going to read the book, hopefully wins a winner, and hopefully he finishes both of them. And whatever ending he comes up with, I'm going to pretend that was the real season 8. And I'm just going to never watch the others. Season 7 had its issues, but I rewatched it. It still has its moments. Season 8 was just garbage. But yes, you're right. I did not rewatch it, nor will I likely ever. On that note, let's jump into some politics.
All right.
Because we went from Westeros and the political realm of Westeros to the United States political situation. So we are going to do things, again, just like the football section, a little bit different. We're always evolving. We're trying to adapt on the Pigskins and Politics podcast. So we are going to start with an update on the general election, as we've been doing. So currently, Biden's lead in the popular vote, Joe Biden's lead, is now over 7 million. So once again, for context, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by a little less than 3 million, and of course ended up losing the Electoral College. So Biden's lead is now over 7 million. National vote doesn't actually mean anything with regards to the election, but it's just an indication of what this election ended up being. And that was, I believe, a referendum on Trump. The Supreme Court on Tuesday denied a request from Pennsylvania Republicans to block certification of the Commonwealth's election results. So this was just the latest blow to the Trump administration, to the Trump campaign, really, to try to do anything they can to turn over the inevitable results. So Republicans in Pennsylvania tried to appeal to the Supreme Court, and they just flat out denied the request. So I think we mentioned last week on the politics chat with Claudie that Trump was something like 1 in 35. You talk about losing records, like that's Jets territory right there, right? 1 win, 35 losses, and the 1 win was like affected maybe 100 ballots. So this is yet another blow. The inevitable is coming. Biden is going to he's already the president-elect, and he will be inaugurated on January 20th, 2021. So he made a few more cabinet picks, and we'll quickly go through these here just because I like announcing them, especially because they are relevant. So Biden named retired General Lloyd Austin as Secretary of Defense. Now, the reason that's significant is he would, if he gets through the Senate, he would be the first Black person to lead the Pentagon. So there's been a lot of people of color. There was a Latino pick. There's a lot of diversity already shaping up in Biden's administration, which is fantastic to see. He also named Representative Marcia Fudge as the HUD secretary, so the Housing and Urban Development Secretary. She is a Black woman, so adds yet another Black woman to his cabinet. So you've got a Black vice president. You've got all of these people of color added on to his administration so far, really doing a great job adding diversity. Happy to see that. So I want to turn it over to you now just to get first your general thoughts, because I've got this from every guest that's come on so far. What are your general thoughts on the election? You can go the fraud angle, you can go the turnout angle. What are your just high level thoughts on the election, as it were?
I'm glad it's over. Um, I mean, ultimately, I was
It's
happy with
not
the
over in
results,
Georgia. It's still
right?
going on in Georgia.
I was happy with the results. I know you guys have talked a little bit about the polling. Yeah, I wasn't a huge surprise to me. The polling was off the way it was. Yeah, I mean, the biggest surprise was obviously Georgia. The fact that they flipped Georgia blue. But yeah, I mean, look, like I said, I'm just ready for it to be over. I'm ready for all this conversation to be over about fraud and the harm that it's doing to the democratic process. To me, he being Trump has been teeing this up since 2016. I mean, prior to the election in 2016, I remember watching one of the debates, and they said, "Hey, will you accept the results?" He said, "Oh, I will absolutely accept the result if I win." I mean, he was, claiming fraud, and that would be the only way that he would lose in 2016. Now, had that happened, then everybody just kind of would have laughed it off. Nobody would have taken it seriously. Now people are taking it seriously, and that's the problem. I mean, there's zero proof there's any type of fraud. You've got, I think you called out a statistic on last week's podcast. You said something like 74% of Trump believers believe that there was fraud in the election. Every Republican I know, which includes a good majority of my family, yeah, they tend to think the same thing, and it's just it troubles me.
And not just that there was fraud, but they believed that he was the legitimate winner. They believed Trump legitimately won, and it was actually stolen from him.
Right, and here's my biggest issue with that is, and I think it's true of pretty much any conspiracy theory. Something I learned a long time ago in life, and that's if two people know a secret, that's one too many. All right, it's damn near impossible to keep a secret. You're talking about something on such a widespread scale, across states that the number of people that would have to be involved, and yet nobody.
Including Republicans. Republicans would have to be involved.
Republicans, Democrats. I mean, so many people would have to be involved. This entire deep state that exists out here would have to be involved to rig this election, to make things happen in the way that they think, and yet everybody's going to stay silent about it. No, not a single person is willing to break ranks and come across. There's not a single shred of evidence. I mean, this has been the most masterful job of fraud that has ever taken place anywhere, and secrecy. These guys are amazing.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's just ridiculous. I feel the same way, and I laugh when we hear about Antifa. Now I believe that there is some some people out there that claim Antifa, some individual groups that are like, oh, we are Antifa, we are part of Antifa. But to me, it's a boogeyman for the right.
Well, there's extreme on both sides. It's not that there isn't, but yes, they will tend to zero in on a particular group, and Antifa is just the one that they tend to bring up the most.
Well, that's it. I look at it, and I'll see, and most of these are just fake memes put out or whatever else. They'll show these mugshots of Antifa people arrested, and it looks like something out of the Suicide Squad. These green hair, and yeah, it looks like a bunch of jokers on there. But if that's the case, and let's pretend for a moment that it is, that all these people are part of this Antifa organization. Well, it's got an omerta stronger than the mafia. You can't crack it. You can't get through to leadership. You've never identified it. I mean, come on now. It's just, it gets to a
Isn't
realm
it
where
George Soros? Isn't he like the leader of all the bad things left?
that's true. That's true. That's my general thoughts. I'm ready for all this to be over, for us to inaugurate our new president and try to get on with things. Do I think it's going to be 4 years of healing? I don't know. Am I hugely enthusiastic behind Biden? No, but like the other 7 million more people that voted for Biden over Trump, it was more a matter of voting against Trump than voting for Biden.
And we've talked about that on previous episodes, specifically with the ticket splitting we mentioned last week. That a lot of people voted for a Republican senator or Republican congressperson, but voted for Biden or didn't vote for Trump. Maybe they voted third party. So yeah, I think it was clear. The facts speak that it was a referendum on Trump. So one of the things I wanted to talk about with you today, and it's come up, I believe, in every one of the politics podcasts that I've done so far, is we talk about the divide in the country, specifically the two-party system, Democrats, Republicans. And I know I share the sentiment that I consider myself. I try to be moderate. I try to be pragmatic. I believe in. I'm not. I don't. A little bit of here, a little bit of there. That's how everybody should be. You shouldn't just stick to one dogma or another. So, what do you think are the chances? Would the U.S. ever see a legitimate third party? Is there? Yes, there's independents out there, but for instance, the independents in the Senate, they still caucus with the Democrats. Most independents who are not a part of the voters who are not part of the Democratic or Republican Party, they still lean left or they lean right. Right. So what are the chances, or what is a way you could see a third independent party or a different name party, legitimate, not the Green Party, who they don't really get any traction. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's potentially maybe the one positive I see coming out of the last 4 years. And by that, I mean, I can't I can't count now the number of prominent, respected Republicans who, in the last 4 years, have been now labeled rhinos. And some of them have been, I won't even say forced out, but they've chosen to opt out of the party. Not that they've gone to the Democrats; they've just opted out. Said, "I'm done with politics." I mean, Jeff Flake is one that comes to mind. I think McCain was kind of in that boat. Now he wound up dying. So,
Right.
uh, um,
Well, his wife Cindy, who endorsed
right.
Biden.
Mitt Romney is kind of there, kind of not. I think they're a handful. I'll tell you one Republican I really like is Ben Sass.
Mm,
And I think that he would be, and again, so I sit here and I watch Trump come out and criticize him for refusing to play into Trump's election fantasies. But yeah, the Republican Party has changed. And at first I laughed when you took all these, when they would call these respected, long time part of these swamp Republicans and start calling them rhinos, but they really are now. Because if you're not willing to kowtow to Trump and go along with everything that he says, that is the new Republican Party, is the Trump Party. So I would like to see some of these more, moderate conservatives, those who have a spine to them and are willing to stand up and say, no, this isn't what we represent. This is never what we've represented. Come more over into that independent side. So even if it is a right versus extreme right, more so than, like you said, all the independents lean one way or the other. But for me, it becomes a math game. And, some of it comes from my watching Survivor since season one of Survivor. But, a small group can be a very significant swing vote. And so if you had a group as small as, let's say, 6 true independents, you could have a count like 45 Democrats and 49 Republicans, in the Senate. Those 6 would be the swing vote. They could guide every ounce of legislature and really force the two sides to meet in the middle. You can say, okay, let's use an extreme example. Say the Republicans are like, no, we want every gun legalized, no limitations, no restrictions at all. People can own tanks if they want. The Democrats say, no, we're going to come take every one of your guns. Well, the central party could sit here and say, okay, we're not going to take everybody's guns because the Constitution says you can have guns. So either you come up with something that's more in the middle, and we'll talk about signing on with your bill, or we're going to go over here, which is extremely the other side of what you want, and really force the two sides to come together, or just act as that middleman and force them to say, hey, if you want us to go your way, make these adjustments. If you want us to go, your way, if you want us to veer left, make these adjustments. And again, force them to meet in the middle. I think they become a real strong force. And really, in my conversation with people, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, that's what we want. I know I may lean 80% left, but not, I don't consider myself an extreme leftist by any means. Now it's funny, I hear somebody like Ted Cruz out here in Texas. There's not a single person in the Democrat political system that's not an extreme leftist. But there are varying degrees, and I'd like to see that come into play. And I think if somebody like Ben Sass did it, there's that risk that, hey, if we're not going along with the Republican Party, I may lose the Republican Party, lose my seat, lose my voters. But I think especially if you did it early in a 6-year term and said, hey, I'm going to do this because it's what's right for the country. And yeah, most of America does not believe in everything that the Republican Party stands for or everything that the Democratic Party stands for. They believe in some things the right does and some things the left does, and would like to see more of a middle. Again, I think the country needs some kind of healing, and I think that would be a great start to bring that about, to be forced.
And one of the things you mentioned was that these kind of Republicans who are more center focused, uh, they need to understand the predicament that their party is in. We also talked about this last week, specifically related to that poll. So if 3/4 of the people who voted for your presidential candidate said that they would leave your party if Trump said so, it's that simple. They're not attached to the Republican Party. So the Republicans who are more moderate, who are centrist, who are more pragmatic, need to step up and realize, for the sake of their own party, that there's a reckoning. And if you just let it be Trump's party, then it is just Trump's party. And if he decides on a whim to start his own, just because he feels like it, because he wants to run in 2024 under the Trump party, as you say it, there goes the whole GOP. So I think that's something that Republicans need to be concerned about is what are the ramifications of this being Trump's party? Is there a way for you to take it back completely or branch off and perhaps, like you said, have a far right party and then a center right party? It'd be great to have four. Let's have a far left party, a center left, a center. Why not? I mean, it's obviously much easier said than done. But it's something that I think would benefit our country to have more sides of the argument. It's not nothing's black and white, nothing's left or right. Why does it have to be one or the other?
Yeah, no, like I said, I agree completely. I'd like to see more just as a central ground. I mean, like I said, most of us don't fall completely on one side or the other, but it seems like everybody's forced to these days.
Yeah, and I've mentioned I understand. I was raised as a Republican. I have members that are Republican. I understand certain parts of it. Certainly, fiscal responsibility is a good thing, and being fiscally conservative in certain aspects. I also believe in helping our fellow Americans, and sometimes that means social programs that need funding. But reckless spending is not a good thing, right? And I understand libertarian leanings and personal freedoms, but this is America for a reason. But that doesn't mean but I've come to those conclusions on my own. And so why can't we have more people in the middle who just say, I believe in this, and what's my label? I don't know. I'm not left. I'm not right. I'm just in. Let's just have independence and just actually be independence. The problem is it becomes hard from an electoral standpoint to actually beat a Republican or a Democrat because people just go and they vote their party, and so that's where the problems come in.
Yeah, I mean, and they lose the support from that, all the money that rolls into the Republican and Democratic national conventions, and yeah, they don't want a third party in there. They don't want that
No.
competition.
Then you have to face the money. Yeah, like you said. So there's no independent convention that is fundraising and supporting and getting behind these candidates. So yeah, it's a very very steep hill to climb.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
you almost need a Trump-like figure, a billionaire, to come out and start this movement.
well,
Somebody that has the
Bloomberg tried
capital.
it. I mean,
Yeah,
yes, he
kind
worked
of.
for the Democrat, kind of. But he was an independent. He was registered as independent. He started running for the Democratic nomination. I believe he used to be Republican. I believe he was registered as Republican in the past. So that kind of character. I'm not saying he's the one, but that kind of character. You're right. With his own funding, with his own bankroll, who doesn't need to rely on outside
Well,
funding.
and I don't think you start with the presidential seat. I mean, like I said, you prove the metal of it in the Senate, and then as you start coming at, I think that at that point, if they prove that hey, there is an independent third, more neutral middle party, yeah, I think you'd actually see it blow up. Do a good yes, that's what we've been looking for.
Yeah, good point. Let's move on and talk about Michael Flynn. We all know him from the Russia investigation. Was pardoned by Trump on November 25th with regards to his involvement in the Russian investigation, and just yesterday or today, the judge dismissed the criminal case because, well, he got pardoned. So what's the point? What do you see? Is this a dangerous precedent that he's setting with these pardons with Flynn, and rumored to pardon, maybe even pardon himself preemptively if that's a thing?
That I think is the dangerous precedent. Pardoning Flynn, I don't think surprised anybody. Um, I think that had Cohen kept his mouth shut and stayed in there, he probably would have pardoned Cohen. I think it's a reward for staying loyal to him and not giving all the dirt that you could have. And I think that's again, I don't find that a surprise to anything. The dangerous precedent, yes, I think if somehow it's determined that he can pardon himself for any crimes that he may have committed or anything that's taken place in the past, yeah, that's an extremely dangerous precedent because at that point, yeah, I mean, I think that in the last 4 years they've gone with the precedent that you can't indict the sitting president, and now you're going to say, hey, you can't indict him even after he's no longer sitting for anything that he did wrong. So at that point, as president, you're essentially a dictator. You can do whatever you want to do. You're saying there is no consequence for anything that you've done. So yeah, that's an extremely dangerous precedent, and I don't see how that would fly. I also, I've heard there. I don't see how you're not admitting guilt at that point.
I want to ask you something that I asked Claudia last week, and that was, where does Trump go from here? We kind of took the angle of he's going to start a media empire. Does he run in 2024? Does one of his kids run? Obviously, he's got the power. He's got this large legion of people who will follow him anywhere, including a new party. What do you think is next for Trump, both after the inauguration and maybe over the next 4 years?
Trials. I really do. I believe that the Southern District of New York has a mound of evidence that they're waiting to spring on him. And that's like, again, we're, segued right over here from the pardons. But yeah, I think unless something comes out where he's able to pardon himself, and I think he'll try just to delay things in court. I think that's a big part of his panic about leaving the White House. He knows as soon as he leaves the White House, he's going to be facing indictments for a number of things. So yeah, that's what I think his future holds, his trials. Now, more to your point, yes, I think he's going to go and try to start a media empire. I mean, it's just amazing to me how he will turn his back on anybody that does, not only turn his back, but all his supporters go along with it on anybody that's just not willing to go along with his fantasies. I mean, he blew up at Fox. He's using the reason that, they projected Arizona for the Democrats too quickly, and there's actually some truth to that. They probably called it for Arizona sooner than they should have. But
It was early. They ended up being right, but yes, they called it early.
yeah, but I mean, his bigger take with them, if they were all in his corner now and saying, "Oh, yes, it was fraudulent and everything else," he would be all for them. But as soon as they, you know, essentially refuse to broadcast or back up these fantasies of his, go watch OANN, go watch Newsmax. I mean, it's all just about trying to point people to wherever they can get what they're going to consider to be good news. And I think that's been a giant shift that we've seen in the media over the last 10, 20 years. When I grew up, a lot of what we were watching was just local news. There might have been some cable networks with worldwide news, but it was news, it was facts. Now you can't get that. I cannot sit there and watch the news and just have it give me facts. They want to tell me the facts and then tell me how I should feel about those facts. And that's the most frustrating thing to me. And I think that it's all really driven by these networks, whether it be Fox, whether it be CNN, and they both escalate over time, is them wanting to present nothing but good news to their viewers. You can take the exact same facts, but you spin it in a way that your viewers will find positive.
Well, I think that started with 24-hour news, right? Once you had these channels that had to constantly be feeding stuff to their viewers, then you have to find ways to constantly get viewers. So you're not just telling them what's actually happening, you're telling them how they should feel about it. And if you can tap into someone's emotions for anything, but especially when it comes to what's going on in the world and what's going to affect them and their families, then you've hooked them. So you're right. Fox News is not the only culprit. A lot of these major networks, they have to add an element of entertainment, and that's unfortunate. And I think that's one of the reasons that's led to our current divide in this country is that there's just too much emotion involved.
Well, and
You
Fox
know,
News came about as a reaction. I mean, they really did come out as a reaction to the mainstream media or liberal media or whatever you want to call it, because as we found out with these last two elections, I grew up in a city. I grew up in liberal neighborhoods. My family was Republican, but this whole element of the country out there, honestly, I guess has been uncovered to me in the last 4 years, has been a shock. I didn't know that many people, whether I'm watching the rallies, whether I'm watching interviews, I haven't lived in that part of America.
I grew up in the South, so I have lived in that part of America.
I mean, I live in Austin, Texas now, but as it was described to me when I moved here, it's a blueberry in the middle of tomato soup. So even in Texas, I don't live in that.
Right. Anything else you're interested in discussing off the top of your head with politics? I wanted to make this more conversational, a little less kind of newsy than I've done the past few episodes. Anything else in particular? Anything that's grinding your gears in politics?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll bring up one thing. It was a conversation I was having with a buddy of mine earlier, and that's there's been a little bit of controversy, I guess, lately, or at least it's blown into a story about Trump not securing the additional potential 100 million vaccine doses from Pfizer. I don't know if you've seen that story.
I saw something about it earlier. Yes, where they had the opportunity to over the summer. I think it was June or July, and they passed.
Right, and so now, and I may be getting some of these a little bit mixed up, but essentially, Pfizer's like, no, well, other countries committed to those additional doses, so we're now on the hook to send all these additional doses out to other countries. I saw something today, and I haven't read the details on it now, where Trump has either done it or is threatening to put on an executive order that says
It's not done yet, but he's going to be releasing an executive order that just prioritizes America. There's questions over what it actually means, and actually, they asked the vaccine czar, who the person, I don't remember his name, who they put in charge of this, of like Operation Warp Speed, and he didn't know what it meant. So to be determined what power that would actually have. But yes, he's going to release one that says America should get the vaccine stuff first.
Now it's funny to me though, because that seems very anti-Republican to say, hey, we're going to tell you how to not only tell you how to run your business, tell you who you have to sell to, tell you, but that's neither here nor there. So, yeah. But anyway, I had a conversation with a friend of mine. He said, "Well, why wouldn't that be smart? You've got the three different drug makers out there. You didn't know who was going to, who was going to come out first. Why would you want to lock in, additional doses that may or may not be helpful, that may or may not be the best, that you may or may not need?" I was like, dude, at this point, it's a drop in the bucket. I mean, we've done a $3.2 trillion stimulus so far, with more coming. There's billions of dollars draining out of the economy every day. I don't know what they were trying to charge for these 100 million doses. Let's assume, and this is, I'm going to guess is on the high. Let's assume it's 100 million each. So you're talking $10 billion. It's an insurance policy. Hey, maybe you need it, maybe you don't. If you wind up flushing it down the toilet, I mean, again, we've spent trillions of dollars on a stimulus at this point. It seems like it would have been the smart thing to do.
And like any insurance policy, it's there in case you need it. Well, we need it.
Yeah.
This country, the world needs this vaccine. So why not bet on the best case scenario and secure these vaccines ahead of time when they had the opportunity? And if it doesn't work out, it's like insurance. You might pay a premium and not need it, but it's better than not paying the premium and ending up in the hospital and needing it and not having it.
Well, not only that, and I don't know the full backstory behind it, but if what you've been touting here is that you're fully behind the drug companies and you're willing to, I'm looking at it like if they're on the hook to these other countries, it was probably more of an investment, as part of we're going to lock this price in. Hey, go ahead and lock this price in. We need some money now so we can continue our research, so we continue manufacturing. You're putting money in so that you can get this product down the line. We should have been doing that for the drug companies anyway. And if you listen to, to Trump talk about it, it's not like that's where, hey, we will give them all the money, all the resources they need in order to get this done. Okay. I also can't help but wonder, just as kind of a side point to that, had we secured those doses, had you provided that investment, whatever that backstory may be, maybe the news of vaccine progress would have come out prior to the election instead of the Monday after the election. Yeah. Maybe timing, or maybe politics. Maybe they said, no, we're not going to put this news out because he wouldn't back us up. And I don't know. It's just things to think about on the back end.
Things to think about. I'm going to use that as a wrap on this. Jay, you've been absolutely fantastic. It's been worth it to have for your voice alone. I look forward to listening back on this. You definitely have a voice made for radio, and in this case, podcasting. So thank you again, Jay Averill. Amazing football analysis. You slayed it in the politics. And of course, the palate cleanser with your top 5 shows was very, very interesting. So definitely probably going to have you on again. Love having you on. Thanks to everybody who's listening. This is the politics chat of the Pigskins and Politics podcast. We'll be dropping, as a reminder, 1 NFL episode each week and 1 politics chat each week. Please subscribe, give us some 5-star reviews, leave us some feedback, send me an email, pigskinsandpolitics@gmail.com. We're already getting some feedback and we're altering the show as a result. So let us know what you like, what you didn't like. See you next week on the PPP.